Hello guys, this is a short video about what I'm planning for Path of Exile to launch tomorrow. Conduit is a skill that deals lightning damage in an area, and it deals more damage when enemies are shocked. The thing with Lightning Conduit is that it cannot shock the enemies itself, so we will need another skill to shock the enemies, because Lightning Conduit removes the shocks on enemies, okay? But in exchange, it deals more damage considering the shock and the more damage from the skill itself. So for that, we're going to be using Ball of Lightning, which is a skill that you cast and it goes through the enemies. And this is a skill that we're going to use to shock the enemies. As you can see, it even has a modifier in its skill itself that provides more shocks or facilitates to shock the enemies. And we are adding a lot of support gems that we're going to see later on in the video to potentiate this chance to shock. So we can cast a skill. The Ball of Lightning will go through the enemies, shock the enemies continuously, because this is a skill that hits the enemies each 0.2 seconds, and we will be removing those shocks on the enemies with Lightning Conduit, and at the same time the Ball Lightning will keep refreshing those shocks, and we are going to deal that extra damage aside from the damage itself from the skill. And this combo, I think it will be pretty good. Later on, we're going to see a skill tree. We're going to also see the buff auras and the curse setup, okay? In this video, we're going to see the Ascendancy, a draft skill tree, starting skills for leveling, skill planning, defenses, and damage scaling. First, let's start with Ascendancy. I decided to go with the Sorceress, Stormweaver. Because the game is completely new, there will be a lot of new stuff to learn and to understand, and a lot of concepts to grasp, so I don't want to add more complexity on top of that. And the Stormweaver is the classical elemental spellcaster, and also because I like this archetype. So the first node that I will take is the Arcane Surge. As you can see in the tooltip, the Arcane Surge gives us more cast speed and more mana regen rate. Both of them are more multipliers, as you can see. This is especially strong because they will scale off with other increased sources. And the cast speed will give us a little bit more DPS. And then we have the mana regen rate, which is especially good early on to avoid having mana issues. And later on, because we're going to use the Archmage buff effect. The second node that I'm planning to take is the Strike Twice. So this will boost our damage, and also because the build will be focused on scaling the damage through the shocks. You will see later on the skill planning that I'm taking a lot of stuff trying to play with the shocks and consuming them and then applying them again. Then the third node will depend on our progression. If you already have a way to apply the exposure, then we will take this node. If we don't have that, then we will try to see how our mana pool looks like, and we have to consider getting this node for the Force of Will to have a better Arcane Surge. Or if we see our character lacking of defenses, we will take the Hearts of a Storm to have a little bit more defenses against the elemental damage that we can take in the campaign. Okay, so for the skill tree, I have a draft for the start, especially for the first 50 points. And this is a little bit not easy to see the path here, but I will try to walk you through, because this is all we have up to now. So we're going to start as a sorcerer. So yeah, we are starting here in the top, and the first nodes are some interesting choices, but I'm definitely picking the damage because you really need damage generally, at least in Path of Exile 1. So this helps clearing the mobs faster, instead of getting some extra mana or energy shield. So I'm definitely picking these nodes because early on they are noticeable, at least for the early stages. Then I'm picking this node, and you can consider getting this Open Mind for more mana regen if you see that you are running out of mana. Then I'm pathing through the left. I'm not picking any of these nodes because this is some chaos damage, minion, and some critical for spells, which we aren't going for critical early on. And I'm rushing these nodes right here. Here we have the penetration lightning resistance and some int. We also have the option to go through here for exploit the elements. This seems a pretty good node, but I don't know if we can inflict ailments early on, so I'm skipping at least for the start, and later on when we have our shock setup, we can consider getting this cluster here. Okay, so we're going to the top and we're getting this node for more elemental penetration. I think that with this node and this node, you're going to be penetrating all of the base elemental resistance, especially for the lightning one, or all the mobs that we are going to see in the campaign. That's my assumption. We can get more if we want through the support gems that we're going to see later on in the skill section. Then we go to the top and we are going to pass through the right here. We're trying to get these nodes. This is an unknown node. This is a node that scales off your intelligence. Since we won't have many at the start, I would recommend not getting them. And this gives us more penetration in case this is needed. Otherwise, I will skip it up until we have more exposure effect. Then we are passing through here. I'm expecting that we are using the Archmage at this point. If we have already the Archmage, I'm expecting also through here, which we have more maximum mana, and I'm guessing that the small nodes also are going to provide more mana, or at least more mana regen, which will come handy when we have the Archmage. Then we're going down again, and we are getting these nodes, which we don't know what they are, so we have to evaluate this on the run. But as you can see, the nodes here form some lighting, so I'm expecting this could be related to shock, so this could be pretty good for the build since nothing else interacts with shock. Then we can path from this point to the left and get these that increase our life, mana, energy shield, and help us a bit against this stun threshold. Okay, much later on we are trying to get this node, which gives us all maximum elemental resistance. This is especially good after we have or elemental capped, so that won't be happening early on in the first part of the campaign. And that's all the 50 points for the skill tree. There are a lot of nodes that we don't know where they are, but we can see, for example, that this area is all minion related, and here we have more elemental stuff. I'm expecting that we can get more or intelligence for this node, or we can get more ailment stuff here, which could be pretty good. So we have to wait and see tomorrow if we are expecting there or not. And also, if you're lacking in the defense department, we have to start taking some regen here or that kind of stuff, or more energy shield to survive the encounters. And lastly, I want to say that I'm planning to using a shield, so I really want to get some block, which we can see that here in the left part of the tree we can get some nodes for block. I don't know how good it would be to pass through here and start getting this stuff, but that's the idea I have after we have a developed tree and our damage is fine and we have a decent pool of mana and energy shield. Okay, so this is all the setup that I have planning for the skill gems, and my main skill is going to be Lightning Conduit. Lightning Conduit is a skill that we already have in Passive Exile 1. This is a lightning skill that hits the enemy and deals more damage if the enemy is shocked. So first we have the Lightning Conduit setup, which I'm using the added lightning damage, innervate, lightning mastery, lightning penetration, control distraction. I will leave in the screen a list of all the possible support gems that we can add to Lightning Conduit to boost its damage. We know that the skill exists, but we don't know the details of how much damage it does or how much extra damage it does to the shocked enemies. But I'm expecting that the extra damage it's a more multiplier, so that's going to be pretty good. Then we are using the Voltaic Mark to increase the shock effect when we inflict it and when we deal damage with the Lightning Conduit. So this is pretty good, and it's especially good for or big rares or unique enemies, bosses. Then we have the Ball Lightning. This is a skill that we will use to shock the enemies, okay? Because one thing that the Lightning Conduit does is that even though it's a lightning skill, it cannot shock. It cannot shock by the definition of the skill. So we have to shock by other means, and then the Lightning Conduit will remove that shock and deal more damage. That's the whole idea in this build. Ball Lightning is especially good on my eyes because one, it's a skill that has more chance to shock, as you can see in the description. So it's low damage won't affect that much when we want to inflict shocks. Shocks in passive side 2 changes compared to passive side 1 because there's no shock effect based on the damage that you deal. All shocks are 30% and you can amplify that effect, but the effect doesn't change based on the hit. So we only need to care about inflicting a shock, like we inflict an ignite, for example. So we just need the chance to shock, and that always going to be 30% extra damage taken by the enemy that we are inflicting this shock. So Ball Lightning has a special mode, as you can see, that it has more chance to shock. This is compared to Passive Exile 1 that's dealing more damage, or dealing shock as you had more damage or something like that we had previously. This basically increases that chance of inflicting shock, even though that the damage from the base damage from the ball lightning can be low. The second point that is pretty good for this skill is that it's a skill that you cast, and it's a ball that it keeps doing damage and it keeps inflicting the shock. So we're going to be casting the Lightning Conduit skill, and we are going to be removing the shocks. But the Ball of Lightning, since it's a continuous skill, it will keep inflicting the shock each 0.2 seconds to the nearby enemies. But we will cast one Ball of Lightning, and then we are going to be casting Lightning Conduit continuously to remove those shocks, and Ball of Lightning will shock again, and we will be creating the cycle between the skills. They think that they're going to be pretty good. So the supports for Ball Lightning are going to be all related to shock. For example, Conduction will increase the chance of shock. This doesn't give the 100% chance. This increases the base chance that the skill has. Then we have the Lightning Exposure that will cause the enemies that are shocked to be inflicted with exposure, which will reduce the lightning resistance from those enemies. This has especially synergy with our Ascendancy. Then we have the shock chance to have some base chance for shock. So this already is 40%. And finally, I have this for the Cursing Current, which makes the proliferation of the shocks so we can inflict more consistently on the enemies that are hit by the Ball of Lightning, okay? I will leave a list here in the screen with other support gems that we can also add here. And all of these, the priority and when we are getting them are going to depend when we get the skills in the campaign, okay? Then we're using the Lightning Warp as a movement skill. In Passive Exile 2, this changes because we are not moving continuously using a movement skill like in Passive Exile 1. So this is a movement skill just to add some utility for the build. So what the skill does is that when an enemy is at the cool range, you will teleport to the enemy and cool the enemy, okay? And when that happens, you will leave a shock ground, which I think is reduce on the elemental resistances from the enemy, or they take more damage. I don't know, but it's on the line of the build. And then we are in the Shock Siphon support, which recovers as energy shield when the skill that is support kills an enemy. And since the Lightning Warp is always calling the enemy, this will always trigger once we trigger the skill, okay? This is not huge, but it's just some extra recovery that we can have in the build. Then for the aura setup, we're going to use Archmage, okay? We are going to see how this feels, how the mana cost affects our build, and how early we can get it without being a burden. But I want to try to invest into max mana, get the node, for example, for more spell damage based on your max mana, and try to get extra regen. And I think that our Ascendancy is the perfect one, since we have the Arcane Surge power permanently on our character. And yeah, I want to really try to the Archmage. If this doesn't work, we will have to find other utilities with our other auras, okay? Then I'm adding Cannibalism. So since this is a support for auras and it gives us more life regen, this is always active as long as the aura is active too. Then we have the curse setup, which uses the Blasphemy. I'm pretty sure that Blasphemy is going to be a skill that's going to be popular among many builds. We are using the Enfeeble, which reduces the damage from nearby enemies that they deal to us. So this is an extra defense layer, which is pretty good. And then we have the Vitality to give us some regen, some passive regen while the aura is active. Okay. Then I added here the temporal chains, that this is for the curse setup when we get +1 curse. This is experimental. Okay, in the last section of this video, we're going to talk about the scalings. For example, for the defenses, I'm planning to use the armor and ES bases. So we can use the armor for the physical damage and the ES because we have a lot of ES potentiators in our side of the tree. Then of course we are going to be using ES as another defense layer. Then I want to try to build some block. In Path of Exile, the witch uses a lot of block, and we have in the left side of the tree, but we have to see if it's worth getting or pathing through that zone, because I also want to use a shield, and a wand. But again, we have to check the mods that can be rolled on a two-handed staff versus a wand. So this is all experimental, but I would really like to have some block in our sorcerer. Then we have a lot of regen and recoup, as you can see in the skills, and also we are going to have some in the tree itself. Then at some point I want to try Mom and see how it feels, if we have enough regen to avoid not being able to cast. Then for the damage, our main way to scale damage is through the shock. As you have already noticed, we can shock twice the enemies, so that is a huge amplifier for damage. Then the rest of the damage will come from the gem itself, the support gems, and the benefit of using the lightning conduit skill when the enemy is shocked. Okay, so all that stuff I think that will multiply between each other, and they're good stuff. Even though we don't have the full information here, this on paper this seems pretty good. Then for a more endgame build, we'll have to see and experiment how to pit crit in the build. So that's the last thing that we have to check, how we can get some crit damage, crit bonus, and take the build to the next level. So that's all my plan for the tomorrow's launch. So I would like to know what do you think about all these planning and the skill and using Lightning Conduit in Path of Exile 2. I'm really excited to try out at least. And that's it, guys. I hope you have a very good launch tomorrow. I hope you can play tomorrow, considering the queues and that stuff. And yeah, bye. See you guys in the next one.